when I went to high school and to college, I started singing. And one of the problems was I often wanted to sing, but I didn't have anybody to accompany me. So eventually I decided to learn how to play the guitar so I could accompany myself. I have often had to stop and remind myself that a lot of these students are smarter than I am.
So honest question, who does their homework better, current students or inmates?
Inmates, without a doubt.
So, Casey, I've got a question for you. Would you rather...
Ooh, I like this.
Yeah. Would you rather have a band follow you from the moment you walk out of your room in the morning till you go to bed at night, or have someone narrate everything you do every moment of every day?
Oh. It depends on the band. You know, if there's like womp, no, womp, as I'm walking, I'm not sure if I'm liking that. But hey, having theme music as I enter every room, that's kind of great. Narrating what I'm doing, I'd kind of like to get away with some things. I don't need everyone broadcasting what I'm doing.
Right? But it's
and then Casey picked his nose. Like, shh, no, stop.
That's the thing, right? It's like everything gets announced, and even though the band would get annoying, it's like, you know, I don't need someone announcing to the whole room, "Hey, Brother Tito just farted. Thank you very much for that." You know?
Exactly. That would be a common theme. Yeah, we don't want that.
Right.
I actually think it'd be great to have theme music everywhere I go. If it changed with my mood and like at my main character syndrome, I think that'd be great.
So I once had an app that basically gives you a studio audience, so you can hit the buttons. And I would walk. This was when I was a postulant. I would walk into our formator's office and then hit the applause button. And they were just like, what are you doing?
Ooh.
Exactly.
Yeah. The over-the-top studio audience. I love it. Yes.
Right. Well, we're being joined today by someone who maybe wouldn't have a band following them because he'd be in the band. A friar who has many different talents, very interesting, Father Dennis. Father Dennis, how are you doing?
Doing well today. Thank you for inviting me.
Would love to have you.
Father Dennis, the rock star in the house.
That's
we
right.
are so excited for this.
That might be stretching it a bit.
I don't think so. I tell people
don't sell yourself short.
Right.
Yeah, what do you play? Tell the people what
well,
you do.
over the years, I've played guitar and drums, and I've sung, and I've composed a little bit of music here and there. So most recently, I've been drumming a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he drums at Mass here at Siena College.
And we're not talking like doo-wop music or like swing. I mean, you've played legitimate bands. You've opened for some fun people. I forget who you said before. Who did you open for?
I was in a band at Siena. We won a Battle of the Bands contest. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we were chosen to be the opening act for the visiting act at Siena during spring weekend. And so I played in a band that opened for Fetty Wap, the rapper. I had never heard of him, to be honest with you, but of course he hadn't heard of me either. So
it's fair. It's fair.
But he probably remembered you afterwards.
Maybe, I don't know. I had hoped to meet him, but that never happened, unfortunately.
I'm just trying to picture this. This was not 50 years ago, right? This was recently.
This was in 2019. Siena Fest weekend.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tito, if you're Fetty Wap, what do you do when you come out and you see Dennis as the drummer of this band?
I think I'm just so confused at that point. I'm like, I heard this was a religious school, but are they the band also? You know, I would just have so many questions.
Man, that monk, he thrashes. What got you into playing music, like guitar, drums? Did you play as a kid?
I started actually on the drums when I was 15. My father bought a drum set for my brother, and my brother taught me, and so the two of us started playing together. Then when I went to high school and to college, I started singing, and one of the problems was I often wanted to sing, but I didn't have anybody to accompany me. So eventually I decided to learn how to play the guitar so I could accompany myself. And actually, I learned to play guitar during my novitiate year as a friar. I didn't play until after graduation from college.
Wow.
So one of my classmates and the friars, Jim Scullion, taught me the basics of guitar, and then I took it on by myself. And so I've been playing guitar
you didn't
since
leave
I
the
was...
world of rock and roll to be a friar. You became a friar to enter the world of rock and roll.
Right.
I love it.
Right. You could say that. Believe me, practicing my guitar kind of saved my sanity during novitiate, so it was great.
Yeah, I'm sure. I believe it 100%.
For the people at home, Tito, explain what a novitiate is.
The novitiate is probably the hardest year of being a friar. It depends on where you do it and stuff like that. But for us, Casey and myself, we did ours in Wisconsin, in Burlington, which doesn't have a whole heck of a lot going on, which is fine because
Population 15,000.
Yeah, the novitiate year is a year of prayer and discernment. So we're trying to discern our life as a friar. Do we continue? Do we feel called to this life? But I'll say about Burlington, Wisconsin. It snowed at the end of November, and we didn't see the ground again until the end of April. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah, I tried to follow Dennis's path here. When I got to novitiate, I thought, I'm going to have all this time. I got all this time for relaxation and prayer. It's basically a long retreat. I'm going to learn how to play piano.
Yeah.
And so for 2 weeks, I got a book, and there was a keyboard, and I had actually one of our formators, Dennis, show me some things, and I practiced. I was like, I'm not picking this up. This is going to take way too much time. Nope.
Yeah. I did. I worked on carpentry. I went into the wood shop, and it was just a stress reliever. And anytime I started to get more stressed out about the work that I was doing in the wood shop, I would walk away from it for like a week and then come back.
Yeah, it's important. So I love, Dennis, that you learned the guitar, you play drums. Do you have any major influences? Would you say that you're like a certain band or artist?
Well, the artists that I most admired when I was, that age, first of all, the Beatles, because, of course, I grew up with them, Beatlemania, that whole thing.
That's right.
But one of my favorite composers and musicians was Paul Simon. And so I started off playing a lot of stuff by Paul Simon, Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, America, that's something he did with Art Garfunkel. It was really a lot of his music I was very interested in learning, and that's the music I practiced on. And of course, I love the Beatles, but I did a lot of also. I practiced a lot with James Taylor. I liked his music a lot.
Yeah.
So those were some of the.
My dad is loving this right now.
Yeah.
Some of the.
That's my dad's playlist.
Is that right? There's some of the major influences
Beatles,
on my
James
life.
Taylor.
Later on, I got interested in a couple of more progressive rock bands. I really took a liking to the band The Talking Heads. And I've been a big fan of theirs over the years. And in fact, I was in a band that I sang a couple of their tunes, which was a lot of fun.
This is not, I think, what people would expect when they think of a friar.
Right.
Probably
they think of us
not.
in a monastery praying all day.
They're probably thinking that
You're rocking.
They're probably thinking if I'm playing music, it's the St. Louis Jesuits. I
Exactly,
played them too in church, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are not worship hymns.
Right.
These are worshiping a different type of hymn. Yeah.
Right.
Whenever people find out I work on a college campus and they ask me, "Are you the most popular friar on campus?" I go, "No." I said, I might be second. I'm maybe. I think either Father Larry or myself could kind of vie for that position. But first place is easily Father Dennis.
Everyone's playing for silver.
Right, exactly. The rest of us are just fighting for second place.
So let's transition to that. Dennis, you work at Siena College.
I
so
do.
You've been there for how long?
This is I'm beginning my 42nd year this fall.
Whew.
Wow.
And most of those years I've taught
full
full time in the Department of Religious Studies. I'm down to part-time teaching now, but I'm still in the game, so I'm happy about that.
And I'm going to turn it over to Tito for just a second. Why is Dennis so popular? What would you say is his je ne sais quoi?
Oh, this will be interesting.
First and foremost is his personality, right? I mean, you see here, he loves to joke around. He loves a good joke.
Yes.
And he has a memory for jokes that, by the way, that's fantastic. Loves a good comedy movie. So he's got a great sense of humor. And then what he does, which is just, it's the thing that no one can overemphasize. He is always present, right? It's a ministry of presence. Nowadays, he mostly walks around either on a Friday or a Saturday night to visit all of the RAs who are on duty on a Friday or Saturday night, right? But he's always around. Anytime there's an event going on, he attends it. He's just there and he engages. And between that and his personality, his humor, and the music he's into, students love him. Absolutely love him.
So ministry of presence is just so important. And I think as someone who works on college campus, elementary school campus, high school campus, kids just love having someone around. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're afraid of that sometimes because we don't know what we'll say and we're not cool and we're not like them. But honestly, people just like to have us around. And so, Dennis, what is it like going among people for 40 years now, different generations, and just kind of hanging out? Do you ever feel awkward or is it overwhelming?
Well, at times it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's not really awkward at this point because I've been doing it for so long. I just kind of follow my instincts. And, the business of going and visiting students in the residence halls on the weekends, that was just something I started several years ago, and it's worked so well, and it's been kind of so natural. Very easy to do. And I asked myself, why did it take me so long to figure this out, to do this? I've been doing it now for several years.
What's your knowledge like of the Gen Z lingo? You talk about the kids got Riz and all that.
Right. To be honest with you, a lot of that stuff I have to catch up on. I'm not on top of it. I sometimes have to look up abbreviations that people use in text messages. I don't always get that, Yeah. I'm fairly tech savvy. You wouldn't know it for some of our broadcast problems today, but it's just really, there's always something new to learn, and new lingo, new phrases. There was one that I heard the other day. I can't even remember what it was, but I said, I'm going to have to run to the dictionary for that one.
Urban Dictionary can be our friend.
Right.
Just don't have the random function on. You make sure you know what you're looking up.
Yeah, that's true.
But most of the time, I think I connect pretty well with them. But I really enjoy, especially sitting with the CAs on the weekends and just chatting about things of interest, whether it be movies or music, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I'm curious how the students have changed over the years. So Tito's obviously been there for a couple of years. I've worked with students for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. We don't have quite the long, view of it all. How have the generations been different?
Well, there's a part of this that has never changed. Just the ability to get to know people and to chat with them and to hear their stories and share their stories with each other and with me. I would say that there are certain attitudes that people coming into college that, maybe were a little bit different 30, 40 years ago. I think when I went to college, I might be overstepping my bounds here, but I'm going to just throw caution to the winds.
Do it.
Go for it.
Hot take, here it comes.
I think when I was in college, when I started, which was back in the 70s, I had this sense that it was a privilege to be there. I was lucky. I was fortunate. And even now, the vast majority of Americans don't have an undergraduate degree, so we are among the privileged for having one. Mm-hmm. But there is an attitude, I think, in more recent years where students feel sometimes, I hate to use the word, but entitled. But they're entitled to this, and it has to revolve around them. Right? They want to set the agenda, and it's hard sometimes in the classroom, to kind of make it clear that, my syllabus and my instructions are going to be the things that you have to pay attention to. You can't just make your own course. So there's there's a lot of students kind of go their own way, and they need a lot more attention than they did. I would say the typical student coming into Siena nowadays is a little bit more fragile emotionally than they were 20, 30 years ago. I think the pandemic has certainly contributed to that. But that and the sense of it being something that they're entitled to, rather than seeing it as something that's a privilege. You know, I think of that line from the Spider-Man movie: "With great power comes great responsibility."
That's right.
And they don't think they have power, but in fact they do, and they are very lucky to have a lot of the resources that they have that a lot of people today don't have. So
Yeah,
that's a little bit about how I think they've changed.
I mean, I can only compare college students now to when I was in college. And I kind of see that. I see that there's I guess, in case you can kind of confirm or contradict this if you want, but I think we were more self-driven, maybe more independent when we were in college. Whereas the students nowadays, I see there are those that are independent, but I think the majority of them really need to be guided. They want someone to show the way. They're not as likely to kind of take a risk. And that includes...
I think it's 100% true. And I see that with the high schoolers as well, as they go into this. And I've talked to them directly about this. Like, hey, here's what I'm seeing. You know, what's going on with you all? Like, why can't you lead or anything? And what I've gotten as feedback is, because the stresses are so high for us today. They said when you're 16, 17, and you have to take 7 AP classes to get into college, and you've got to be the president of 7 organizations, and you've got to have your day filled up, there's always someone telling you what to do. You don't actually have the freedom to choose what you want to do or to lead or to make new friends. They're not bored very often. And so I don't think they had that opportunity quite like we did, to be bored, to play outside, to have the freedom to make mistakes.
Right.
Man, from the time they're in 7th grade on, they're thinking about their college application. And that's why so many of them have stress and anxiety, I think.
Yeah.
I will also agree with you from what you said about this independence thing. You know, like you say, there are some self-starters, you know, but with a lot of get up and go. But a lot of people are a lot more hesitant now to take the lead on things. And I noticed that even in my honors classes, you know, those are supposedly the self-starters. And yet even they sometimes need a little bit more nurturing than I would have expected at this point in my career.
It must be a challenge, to have that knowledge, to see where they were, see where they're going. I'm curious, on the other side of it, are there things that you see in the students today that are better? I'll say one, I think in general, students are much smarter today than they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago. The amount that they can do is incredible. Do you see things like that where you say, wow, there's progress here?
Oh, yes. In fact, I have often had to stop and remind myself that a lot of these students are smarter than I am. You know, what sets us apart is not, you know, sheer intelligence. I think they have that in spades. What makes it difficult, or excuse me, what makes it different is I might not have the smartest brain in the world, but I have a lot of experience, and I've had a lot of time to think things through, and you know, to learn from life. And so hopefully, I mean, I try to share that with them in my classes, and hopefully that's something they appreciate. Or they might just be leaving the classroom saying, this old lunatic, how did we ever get into this class? Well, why did we ever take this class, you know, to be with
Is
this
that rock band guy? What's he doing teaching theology?
I'll say you're pretty smart, Dennis. You know, we've talked about this before, but you graduated, you got your postgrad from the University of Chicago. That's not a small thing.
Yeah, you know, I often joke with people. I say, I think they mistook me for somebody else. they thought somebody else. I had a lot of good support in getting into the university. But yeah, I would agree. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of intelligence. But one of the things I learned in getting the degree was most of it is just perseverance and commitment. Everybody who gets into the program has the intelligence to succeed.
Yep.
But a lot of people, when I was going through, a lot of people dropped out of the program, for emotional reasons, not for academic reasons, but they couldn't deal with the pressure and the stress. Just like you're talking about stress with the kids in the grade school, So I don't know where I was going with that, but
yeah, well, in business, you call them soft skills, and
right.
I think that diminishes them a bit, but they're so important. How do we communicate? How do we handle stress? How do we build relationships? How do we manage our time?
Right.
I think it's what you're talking about with that wisdom. You can have the capacity to go to some top technology engineering school. You can work in physics. You can do all these things, but can you plan your meals out?
Right.
Can you balance your budget? Can you do those things and just know when to do what to do? I want to go back to what you said with that experience, because while you have had 42 years here at Siena, and I think that gives you a lot of experience with students, you didn't always live here. And you were telling us before you did prison ministry, which some would argue has a nice correlation with college, but I'm not going to go down that road.
Yes.
What got you into prison ministry? What'd you learn from it?
Well, it's funny. I got into prison ministry through music. There was a colleague of mine at Siena who worked on these retreats at the state prisons. And he approached me one time because he was the retreat director, and he wanted somebody to be the music director for the retreat. So he asked me if I would do music for this retreat at a medium security prison up in Comstock, New York. I was with my guitar. Getting the guitar in through past security was a feat in itself, but I finally managed to get it in there, and my music, and we had a really good time. And it's funny because when I first was approached to do this, we went up to the prison ahead of time and talked to the on-site retreat leaders, the inmates who were, the local retreat leaders. And I walked in that building, and this big heavy door comes crashing behind me. I think they designed those doors for maximum impact, to let you know in no uncertain terms that you were behind bars.
Yeah.
But, for whatever reason, I was not afraid. I was not intimidated. I felt, very much at home talking with these guys. And in fact, I used to joke with people. I say, maybe in a past life I was a crook or something. Maybe that's why I'm so comfortable in here. Who knows? But anyway, I did the retreat, and then I also gave a couple of talks. And lo and behold, I started having a relationship with some of these guys, and some of them wrote to me, and I was like a kind of a spiritual pen pal. When I got back I was on sabbatical for 6 of those months, and I actually was corresponding with some inmates to and from Germany, which was a lot of fun. Wow. But when I got back from sabbatical, about a year or so later, the diocese approached me and asked me if I'd be willing to be a chaplain, officially, be a part-time chaplain. And I thought to myself, and it's funny, I thought this even when I first went to work on the retreat. I said, I know what's going to happen here. I'm going to get hooked on this, and I'm going to have another big responsibility in my life, which I don't need right now. That's the bad news. And the good news is I'm going to have this new ministry that I haven't done before, and it's going to place a lot of demands on me. In other words, it was bad news and good news at the same time.
Yep.
So I said yes, and I ended up working working as an employee for the prison system for about 19 to 20 years.
Wow.
And I worked in a couple of maximum security prisons, and I worked in a couple of mediums, and for a while, one minimum security prison. And, again, it's funny. I'm not a particularly courageous person, but for some reason, I was able to relate to these guys, and one of the things that I did that helped a lot was I started brushing up on my Spanish. And so I got to the point where I was able to celebrate the Mass bilingually and preach in both English and Spanish. I had to have a text in front of me. I couldn't do it extemporaneously. I'd have to write it out and get a native speaker to, approve it so that I didn't make a fool of myself using a vocabulary word wrong or something. But that was really meaningful. One of the most meaningful things for me as a friar priest is to be able to celebrate Mass and preach in a couple of different languages. That really turns me on. I should add that I was a language major in college, so I majored in French. But then
Well,
my
I'm noticing a
languages
theme
became,
here. So you talked about Siena, and what was your main focus? It's ministry of presence.
Right.
And here you go in a prison as well, and you're with people who have no presence. They don't have people
Right.
to visit them. They're alone a lot. They're in a lot of ways dehumanized, and so you
Yeah.
find these people in this vulnerable situation. How do you approach that? Knowing that they have done things wrong, but also knowing that they're a victim in some other ways, in the ways they're being treated.
Yeah. That's something that, like for one thing, I might start by saying I would never ask them what they were in prison for. I didn't want to know. If they chose to tell me, that was fine. I would, certainly listen and be receptive and be a listening ear. But I wanted to treat them as real people. And, I think for a lot of these guys, when they come to Mass on Sunday, the ones that were regular churchgoers, there was at least 1 or 2 hours every week that they could feel like a human being, that they were addressed by their first name, that they were spoken to with respect. And I think they would often say to me things that I found hard to hear. So, for example, one young man who was in prison said to me, you're a great guy. He said to me, I am nothing. And I said, wait a minute, hold the phone right there. You're not nothing. Nobody is nothing. Everybody is created in the image and likeness of God. And so, you need to, in other words, they started believing the bad press about themselves. They started believing the attitudes that some of the correctional officers had with them. And granted, some of them did some very serious, violent crimes. But I have always thought that their whole life is not defined by the one thing or the several things even that they did that got them into prison. Now, one of the things that we did at Siena was we actually ran a education program in the prison. So I actually taught some religion classes and a language class in the prison. So in addition to being a chaplain, I'm a teacher in the college program that they had for a couple of years. And that really opened up a lot of avenues for these guys. All of a sudden, they realized they became aware of skills that they never knew they had.
So on this question, who does their homework better, current students or inmates?
Inmates, without a doubt. They win hands down.
I don't think
They're
they
not
have
going
an
to
excuse.
sorority parties.
No, they're not. And they're not cruising the web because they're not allowed to have access to it.
That's right.
They're not on their cell phones because the cell phones are not permitted.
Mm-hmm.
Tito, is this like your experience in prison?
My experience in prison was once, and it was very brief, and it was I helped out at Mass.
Okay.
But
So you didn't serve time?
no.
Oh, I just assumed you had. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you and several students. So,
Really?
yeah. So, we would do 2 truths and a lie at the beginning of the year with like new students and new CAs, and or we would do a fun fact about a friar, and then you had to guess who the fun fact was about. And Father Dennis put down that he had spent some time in prison. And all it said was, "I have spent some time in prison." And they asked, "Who do you think this is about?" And several students said, "Oh, we think that's Father Tito." And I was like, no.
Oh, man. Going after the brown guy. What is this?
Sure.
I give off that vibe. But
It has nothing to do with the fact that you're Puerto Rican. It's
Right,
just
yeah.
that you're kind of sketchy.
I agree with Dennis in that I think there's something. I just had the one experience, but of helping a chaplain celebrate Mass in a prison, and there's something normal about it that like on the outside, so many people go to church on Sundays, right? Or Saturday or Friday, depending on your faith or denomination. But you have like a holy day that you acknowledge. And it's an opportunity for these guys to do something and experience something that's reflective of normalcy. That's just reflective of the kind of day that everyone or many other people, the kind of thing that they do. And I think it's really, really important for their sanity that things like that be provided.
And I think it's great for us to see that. And I would love to have more connections. I've heard schools that try to connect college students with inmates and have dual classes. So you take classes with inmates, inmates take classes with students. The students get a perspective of how great their life is, right? So they don't feel, the entitlement maybe that you were talking about before. But I think the inmates benefit as well, getting to share their story, getting to be heard, getting to be around people that they don't get to normally interact with. I'd love to see that. I realize, prisons serve their function, and certain people need to be contained, but that doesn't mean they need to be dehumanized or completely cut off from society. You were saying that they've been taught and begin to believe that they're nothing. That's awful. That's not what we want to do here.
So, Dennis, you've done a lot. You've taught here at this college for several decades. You've played music. You've gone to prison. What else have you done? I mean, as if that's not enough.
Well, one of the things I've been involved with over the last 20 years is ecumenical and interfaith dialogue. I've been privileged to represent the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops at these formal dialogues between the Catholic Church and the Reformed churches in the United States. I've been doing that since about 2003. So it's kind of overlapped with the prison ministry. And it's been great. I've been involved with 3 rounds of dialogue, and 2 of those rounds have produced, major documents that are on display. You can go to the USCCB website to see them and to study them. It's funny because I used to say in my younger years, I don't ever want to be on the bishop's radar because it's like being called to the principal's office. When the principal says, "See me in my office," they can't be good, right? So anyway, now I'm working for the USCCB, and it's actually been a pretty good relationship. And I've gotten to know some friends on the Reform side. I've become good friends with a guy who teaches at Calvin Seminary out in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we just finished writing a book together that brings the fruits of those 2 rounds of dialogue to a broader audience. We're looking for a publisher for that right now.
Very cool. I didn't even know you were working on a book.
Yeah, so speak to my cynicism here. Help me through this, because I see 500 years, certainly with the Protestants, and then you've got a little more than 1,000 with Orthodox, different conversation. But you've had, obviously 500 years ago, some major problems. We've made some major strides.
Yes.
But ultimately, what's our goal? I mean, are we really going to become one church? I look at it a little bit of cynicism and say, there's no real success here. But I'm sure you have reason for hope and moments of success.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on how you define success. Because, people say, what is the goal? The first goal is, I would say, the healing of memories. I think that's a very important thing. We need to heal 500 years, some pretty nasty stuff went on in those 500 years.
Yep.
And true. Some pretty nasty words were thrown across the gauntlet, I would say just even to understand each other better is a positive goal and a reasonable goal. To understand where the other person is coming from, to be, aware of that sometimes different traditions will focus maybe on things in a different way so you get a different perspective. I think one of the things that happened before the Second Vatican Council, and this was true of a lot of other communities as well, is people would, had this idea, and you would hear this sometimes in the Catholic Church, though, the whole idea, error has no rights. Those who are in error need to be convinced to come home to Rome. We don't not appreciate that there might be some different perspectives on things. So I think even to understand each other, to respect where we're coming from, to open our eyes and our ears to some different interpretations of the gospel, even if it doesn't lead ultimately to a reunion of churches institutionally. I mean, I would like to see that happen, and I think there's a possibility that it could happen. I'm not going to live to see it. Maybe you will. But I think of, for example, the Christian Reformed Church in North America that my friend Ronald is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They and we have a whole lot in common. And so institutional results may be hard to come by, but I don't think it's totally impossible. One of the things I would say is people have different views on the current Pope, Pope Francis. But certainly when my Reformed friends hear Francis speak and hear him preach, they're very impressed by the fact that he, reach people and be open-minded and compassionate, to the point where they would say if there were more popes like Francis, maybe we would be able to come together. Right now the big issue is, the authority. Who's going to exercise authority? Mm-hmm. Who's going to decide what the correct theology is? And in the Catholic Church, we tend to invest power in specific individuals, whereas in the Protestant churches, some Protestant churches have bishops, but some don't. Some they actually have they make their decisions kind of as almost like a committee or a commission or a council. So there's a lot that still needs to be done. I look at this openness to learning from one another as a good end in itself. And even if we can just start working together for the betterment of the world. I mean, the world is really messed up. It's a hot mess. And we can't afford to be spending our time fighting with each other. We have a world to evangelize. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. I think it comes down to a question, and I think I use this right word, how do you love your enemies?
Right.
An enemy doesn't have to be someone you hate, and I don't think that, Protestants, Reforms are enemies, but, there are opponents in some ways. We have different views on things. Mm-hmm. And this idea that, what did you say, that error has no rights? I think that's a very, it has its place, but it doesn't really bring a lot of fruit. Mm-hmm. I think it makes everything into an ultimatum rather than, as Pope Francis says, we should be walking with, journeying with, learning from, and then hopefully they can journey with us. And I think that comes from giving some people some rights and giving some people some nods and pointing out the things that are good and then lifting them up out of that. Not any different than your work in the prisons, I suspect.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the things, I gave a talk a couple of years ago called True Confessions. And I gave this talk, and I had a Reformed friend of mine was the other partner in this dialogue. And what we did was we started off by saying where we think that our church went wrong in the 16th century. Now, oftentimes we want to start with what we got right. I say, no, what did we get wrong? What did the Catholic Church get wrong in the 16th century? For example, they didn't listen to people. And then the other thing we did was, what can I appreciate in the other traditions? So instead of kind of tooting our own horns, we were beating our own breasts and then offering some thoughts about how we can appreciate the gifts that another tradition can bring to us.
And I think that's really important. You kind of touched on it earlier as well, on the importance of the fact that because we've kind of gone different directions, whether you're talking about, some of the Protestant reform groups, or if you're talking about the Eastern Catholic churches, we have emphasized different things. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who he does religious education at his parish, and I was telling him about my experience at a Coptic Orthodox liturgy. And the one that I happened to attend was basically the children's mass, which is teaching mass, which is perfect because I didn't know anything. And
you're a child.
I was a child
in faith, yeah.
And the priest talked about there were like 6 readings that they did. And he said the reason why we have so many readings is because our liturgy is a progression of repentance and reconciliation until we receive the Eucharist. And like I just like I had this mind blown moment of like, oh my gosh, their liturgy emphasizes the fact that it prepares you to receive the Eucharist. In our Roman, more Western tradition, we've emphasized the importance of coming to the liturgy prepared, but we haven't really focused on how the liturgy prepares you as well. And then you look
Sounds
at
like the Easter Vigil,
right? And then you look at the Reformed churches and the way they emphasize the importance of the Word, and it's the living Word; it lives in them and through them. And I think every tradition has, because of the different directions we've gone, has found something important to emphasize that we kind of forget on our own.
Yeah.
And I love that the idea of a children's mass where you kind of have outsiders in it. I was at a church once that was very beautiful, and it was kind of structurally significant, and so a lot of church groups would come by, and they'd want to just experience mass for the first time. They were all Protestants; they had not Catholics. They wanted an explanation of how things worked, and so I would often get 15 minutes with them, where I'd sit with them after mass and explain the different significances of the church, and then what they saw in the liturgy. And you could just see it in their eyes, like, I get it.
Yep.
And you didn't have to tell them, like, you're wrong,
Right.
or like, this is why I'm right, or any sort of value statement. You just got to share what you loved, and people would say, oh, I love that too.
Right.
And so I think it goes both ways. If we can go to the Lutherans and say, yeah, what do you love?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I like your tradition too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, a couple of my Protestant friends will come to Mass every once in a while because they need to get their fix of spirituality. That they sense strongly the way the Catholic liturgy is, with the smells and bells, for example. And conversely, I know I've certainly benefited from going to Protestant services. I think since the Second Vatican Council, we have been open to learning from one another liturgically, which I think is a positive thing.
Definitely.
Yeah, and in all walks. I mean, they were way ahead of us when it came to ecumenism. They had been doing it since the 19th century.
Right.
We weren't really showing up to the meetings.
Right.
When Vatican II opened up the doors with Nostra Aetate and with the decree on ecumenism, until the Catholic Church got on the wagon, there was going to be limited conversations, I think, among the Reformed and the Reformation churches. But, when the Catholic Church kind of opened its doors to these kinds of conversations, that led to a flurry of activity which is still going on. I think there has been a little bit of backpedaling, but I hope that we will continue to talk to each other and hopefully learn from each other.
Yeah, and recognizing the maybe power or privilege that we have, being how big we are. We don't want to come in like we're the saviors, like, oh, look, ecumenism really took off when we got involved.
Right.
But to recognize that, we have a responsibility. We're the largest, and we have the most history, and what we do has an effect on other people. So
Yes.
maybe we should show up to things and legitimize them.
Yep. That's a good way of putting it.
So what's your vision for the future? What are your hopes for maybe ecumenism? Or just interreligious dialogue? What can you see in your lifetime?
Well, I know that all of these dialogues hit a snag at one point or another. Right now, there's been a bit of a snag in the Reformed Catholic dialogue. The current round kind of fell apart a little bit, and we're trying to put that back together again. What I would like to see in the future is just to keep that door open to conversation and to sharing at times in prayer with one another, and to work together on issues of justice and peace and the integrity of creation. I think those 3 Franciscan themes are themes that are, really apropos to ecumenical and interfaith dialogue as well. And so we can to work together on promoting a more peaceful and just and humane society. God knows we need it right now.
You know, you're giving me shades of Gregory Boyle out in L.A. You know, how do you break down gangs? You don't talk about the gangs themselves. You throw them together, you make them work together. Right. So I think we're kind of like those rival gangs. Let's stop with the minutia. And there's reason for it. There's goodness in the details, of course.
Yes.
But sometimes we just got to work together and pray together.
Yep.
And then we'll be together.
Yes. Yep. And the world will be a better place.
Amen.
You know, I mean, it's funny. There was that song that was done some years ago, "We Are the World," that had all those superstars singing it. But in a sense, this is what we are. We are one world. We have to recognize that, like Pope Francis said, everything is connected and everyone is connected. I think if we went with that, ran with that more, we'd be a much happier world.
And it's why we have people like you who are very smart and have lots of experience that are leading these conversations.
Yep.
Because otherwise, I think we'd just be holding hands and, you know, being shallow. But you're bringing us deeper. You've had that opportunity to listen, to study with a PhD, start learning the languages. We need the real answers, and we need to be together. And
just like that, he vanishes.
There you go. I guess he was not going to wait for us to say goodbye. He bounced. Yep. He's busy. He's got a lot of things to do.
He's got so many things, so many irons in the fire, I tell you. But no, he is an absolute joy to live with. We didn't really get into it, but no one can quote Monty Python or a Mel Brooks movie like that guy. Great sense of humor. Yeah.
Two things the kids probably have no idea what's going on, but they find him to be endearing at his
absolutely
age.
but we have great conversations. You know, we talk about, you know, what's going on in society and the importance of journeying with people. He's just been a great figure to live with for the past 4 years.
I think it's a great lesson for us. The theme that came up throughout all of this is, you know, people that you may be different from, people you may not respect or like that much, that may not be your first choice. Spend some time with them. You know, I don't think that college students are the epitome of a human being right now. They're not like the pinnacle of what it means to make it in this world.
Right.
Criminals, right. People who have broken away from the Catholic Church. These are not the ideal situation for us. Yeah. And yet, look at all the goodness and all the beauty that you can be found there if you just spend some time.
Yeah. In so many ways, he's my model as a friar, just like his willingness to say yes to new and different things, to engage with people, and just to be present with people. His impact wherever he goes is always significant.
Yeah, well, didn't get to say goodbye to him, but you live a couple doors down from him. Why don't you say goodbye when you see him?
I will do. All right.
Other than that, thank you for listening. We took a week off, as you can see, but we're back again. We've got a few people lined up already.
Yep.
Going to be a great summer. Bye, Liz.
Bye, Liz.